I'm going to take you to the holy grail of data collection in Canada.
Okay.
It's called the Canadian Census. Massive budget, massive resources, gold standard in collecting data. Okay. And we do a massive data collection through the Canada Census once every 10 years. And then they do one that's not so comprehensive every 5 years. If you go back and look at the census from 2011, it was around 2% of people who identified that they use bicycles to cycle to work, to commute to work. It was about 2%. The other 98% were using public transit, whether it be buses, subways, or walking. We're using cars. 2% represented commuters to get to work. So that was in 2011. Again, now they did a smaller sample size in 2015, but again in 2016 rather, in Toronto, it remained around 2%, give or take a quarter, 0.5%. And in 2021, did another census, and again it was actually got a little less. It was reduced, came down. Now I'm going to give them a pass on that. I'm going to assume that maybe some of the after effects of COVID, maybe more people were staying at home. But the story and the point I'm trying to make to you is that since 2011, for all the money, for all the resources, for all the time, for all the putting your finger on the scale to try and make it look like the cycling is building, statistically, Census Canada's information, which no one can accuse anybody of manipulating, it's a professional operation, it shows that there's been no growth in cycling on our Toronto streets. So this argument that build out the infrastructure and they shall come just isn't happening, okay? And we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars here on building out infrastructure, putting up concrete, walls in our streets. And that's money that could be better spent on dealing with mental health, dealing with crime on our public transportation system. That's money that can be better spent repairing potholes. Look, I think the population of Toronto know deep down what's good for their own city. And I don't believe people are buying what's going on here. And so I'm going to suggest to you that it's just a matter of time because these people, Cycle TO, who get, by the way, Cycle TO, which doesn't necessarily represent at least a third of their members, from what I've seen from the public opinion polling that we've done and people involved in my organization, Cycle TO is out there. They get grants from the city of Toronto, big grants, to hire set people to work, to promote back to the city of Toronto bicycle infrastructure. They got CERB money. They got money from Trillium Ontario. There was $80,000, $90,000 from Trillium Ontario to hire staff to raise money for them. It's a charity. So every dollar that someone donates to Cycle TO, the taxpayers end up they get a charitable receipt and that gets deducted off of taxes owing. So the reality here is that Cycle TO, which is very closely aligned, there are people within the Cycle TO operation that work in transport at the city of Toronto. So there's a symbiotic relationship there. Guys, it's all smells really bad. From the standpoint of being a professional operation with the Transport Toronto, from what I'm seeing, it's not operating the way I always thought government operated, where they did things objectively and fairly and in the public's best interest. It's been hijacked by people who have an agenda. And that agenda is a dangerous one because it's going to have dire consequences on our city's ability to carry on in a way that people will want to live here. Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, you've looked at the downtown core, which was decimated by COVID. Decimated. Well, who wants to come downtown if it's going to take you 3 times as long because they've got all the roadways narrowed down? And what happens to the businesses downtown? And what happens in our path system? All those small business owners that have mortgaged their houses to set up businesses and run businesses, if there aren't people working in our office towers, how do they pay their bills? How do they pay staff? How do they hire people? So the impact that bike lanes is having in making Toronto downtown core, a less desirable place to want to work and come down to is going to have long-term repercussions. And I really worry because we have a pretty good thing here in Toronto, and it took a long time to get to where we're at right now. But we've got a group at City Hall, and I say councillors as well, certainly the mayor, and to be fair to Olivia Chow, She didn't run on a mandate of not supporting bike lanes. She ran on that mandate. She got elected. She has a mandate. Whether or not she'll get reelected is hopefully a different story altogether. But that's for October 26th of 2026. So, the clock is on. Less than 3 years from now, we'll be back at it again. And Keep Toronto Moving is all about making sure that the public understand that if they're not happy with bike lanes, there's a place you can go, whether or not you live in Etobicoke, whether or not you live up to Danforth, whether or not you live in North York, whether or not you live in the downtown core, there's a place you can go where you can express your concerns and grievances with the city. And we've got enormous momentum, guys. Enormous momentum. I cannot believe the number of people out there that are coming forward and want to get involved. And so, I'm quite optimistic that when we get into the 2026 election cycle, that people are finally going to have a voice and they're going to send a message loud and clear that you're on the wrong path.
I can just say from personal experience, and I am not pro or con either way. If I felt safe using a bike lane, I perhaps might use it. I don't really feel encouraged to do it. As you said, build and they shall come. I have no desire to jump on one of those in any way. We personally live just off of Bloor Street West. It's been a disaster. It's a disaster to drive on. It's a disaster to walk on. It's a disaster to park anywhere to access small business. Now they just cut up the whole thing again. I don't even know what's going on. You only have like a measly section of Bloor Street to walk through when you cross St. George heading eastbound. And I don't even want to drive anymore because it takes so long to get from one place to another. I don't want to go out on the east side of the city or downtown because it takes forever. There is absolutely nowhere to park. And as a driver, which I would say I'm more consistent as a driver than a cyclist, I'm scared of hitting a bike. I actually feel like it's just such a disaster in terms of the rules of the road, e-bikes, pedestrians, construction, that I feel like there's a high probability that I might end up in sort of a confrontation. So I just am choosing to walk to avoid all of it when possible.